One of the biggest misunderstandings in relationships happens when a man starts pulling away just as things begin to feel serious. The first thought that often comes to mind is that he must be losing interest, that maybe his feelings aren't as strong as they once seemed. But the truth is, pulling away isn't always about a lack of feelings. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the stronger the feelings become, the more uncertain a man starts to feel inside, and that uncertainty can make him step back. You have to understand that real connection changes the way a man thinks. When things are light and casual, there's very little at stake. He can enjoy your company without worrying about what it all means. But the moment the relationship begins to deepen, the moment emotions become real, he starts to realize that this situation has the power to affect him in a serious way. And with that realization often comes a quiet kind of fear. It's not always a dramatic fear that he talks about out loud. Sometimes it shows up as hesitation. Sometimes it shows up as silence. Sometimes it shows up as him taking longer to respond or needing more space than before. From the outside, it can look like distance, but inside, he may simply be trying to understand what he feels and what it means for his future. Strong feelings create vulnerability, and vulnerability is uncomfortable for many men. When a man realizes that you matter to him, he also realizes that losing you would hurt. That awareness alone can make him cautious. He may slow down not because he wants to leave, but because he wants to protect himself from moving too fast into something that feels powerful. And here's what many people don't realize. A man can care deeply and still feel unsure at the same time. Those two things can exist together. He can enjoy being with you, think about you often, and still need moments where he steps back just to clear his mind. That space isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's reflection. When you understand this, his behavior starts to look different. Instead of seeing distance as a sign that something is ending, you start seeing it as part of a process. Feelings grow in stages, and sometimes one person needs time to catch up emotionally with what the relationship is becoming. The mistake many people make is assuming that pulling away means the connection is fading. But in many cases, pulling away happens because the connection has started to matter more than he expected. Sometimes the man who steps back is the very man who is beginning to feel the most. As the relationship begins to grow deeper, something else starts happening inside a man that often goes unnoticed. He begins to feel emotionally exposed. In the early stages, it's easy to keep things on the surface. Conversations are light, moments are fun, and there's no real pressure to reveal too much about who you truly are. But when things start getting serious, that surface level disappears. Now he's not just showing you his good side, he's slowly revealing parts of himself he doesn't show to everyone. For many men, that kind of openness doesn't come naturally. From a young age, a lot of men learn to handle things on their own. They learn to stay strong, to keep their worries to themselves, and to avoid showing too much emotion. So when a relationship starts asking for emotional closeness, it can feel unfamiliar. It can even feel uncomfortable, not because he doesn't trust you, but because he isn't used to being seen so clearly. When a man starts caring deeply, he realizes that you begin to see who he really is. Not just the confident version, but also the uncertain parts, the worries, the fears, and the imperfections. That level of visibility can make him feel vulnerable in a way he doesn't fully understand. And when vulnerability feels overwhelming, stepping back can feel like the safest response. Sometimes he pulls away not to escape the relationship, but to regain emotional balance. When he has space, he can process his thoughts without feeling exposed. He can sort out what he feels without the pressure of having to explain everything right away. That quiet time helps him feel steady again. From the outside, this can feel confusing. One moment he seems close and open, and the next moment he seems distant and quiet. But often that distance isn't rejection, it's protection. He's protecting the parts of himself that feel uncertain while he figures out how to move forward. And the deeper his feelings become, the more exposed he may feel. Caring about someone means the stakes are higher. It means his words matter more. His actions matter more. The possibility of being misunderstood or hurt becomes more real. That awareness can make him cautious, even when his intentions are genuine. Understanding this changes the way you see his distance. Instead of assuming he's losing interest, you begin to recognize that closeness itself can feel overwhelming at times. Emotional intimacy asks a person to open doors doors that have been closed for a long time. And opening those doors doesn't always happen all at once. Sometimes a man pulls back simply because being seen so deeply is something he's still learning how to handle. And the closer he feels to you, the more real that vulnerability becomes. Sometimes a man pulls away not because he doesn't care, but because he cares more than he knows how to handle. See, when things start getting serious, it stops being a game. It stops being casual. Now there are expectations, emotions, and a future that suddenly feels real. And for a lot of men, that reality brings pressure they were never taught how to manage. A man might enjoy your company, laugh with you, talk with you for hours, and even imagine a life with you. But when the relationship reaches that point where feelings are deep and commitment is around the corner, something inside him starts asking questions. Questions like, am I ready for this? Can I really be the man she needs? What if I mess this up? Those questions don't always come out in words. Instead, they come out in distance. You might notice the change. At first, he was consistent. He called, he texted, he showed excitement. Then slowly, he starts taking longer to respond. He becomes a little quieter. He still cares, but he's not as present. And you start wondering what went wrong. But sometimes nothing went wrong at all. Sometimes he just reached a point where the relationship became real enough to scare him. Because when things get serious, a man realizes he's no longer responsible for just himself. Now there's someone else's heart involved. Now there are promises that might have to be kept. Now there's the possibility of failure that actually matters. And a man who fears failing will sometimes step back before he risks stepping forward. See, distance can feel safer than disappointment. Pulling away can feel easier than staying and possibly hurting someone he cares about. So he convinces himself he needs space to think, space to breathe, space to figure things out. But the truth is, what he's really trying to figure out is whether he's strong enough emotionally to stay. And here's the part a lot of people misunderstand. When a man pulls away at this stage, it doesn't automatically mean he's losing interest. Sometimes it means the opposite. Sometimes it means the relationship has reached a level that matters enough to trigger his fears. You see, shallow connections don't scare anybody. Real connections do. Real feelings do. Real commitment does. Because once it's real, you can lose something real. So if you ever see a man step back when things start getting serious, understand that sometimes he's not running from you. He's running from the weight of what loving you truly means. Because the moment love becomes real is the moment fear gets real too. Now let's talk about something that confuses a lot of people. The silence. Because when a man starts pulling away, the first thing most women want to do is close the distance. You want to call more, text more, ask more questions, try harder to understand what's going on. That instinct comes from a good place. It comes from caring. But sometimes the more you move toward a man who's pulling away, the further he feels the need to step back. When a man feels overwhelmed emotionally, pressure feels heavier than love. And even if you're being kind, patient, and supportive, he can still interpret constant questions as demands he doesn't feel ready to answer. When he hears what's wrong, or why are you distant, or do you still care about me? What he often hears underneath those words is expectation. And expectation can feel like weight on a man who already feels uncertain. So what happens is he retreats even more, not because he wants to hurt you, but because he doesn't want to fail you. He starts needing space to sort out his thoughts, to calm his fears, to remind himself that he still has control over his own life. And control matters deeply to a man who feels like he might be losing his emotional footing. Here's what many people don't realize. Sometimes a man comes back faster when he feels he has room to breathe. When he senses that he's not being chased or pressured, something inside him settles down. The fear quiets, the pressure lifts, and then he can start missing you in a clear and honest way instead of feeling overwhelmed by the relationship. Because a man has to come toward you on his own terms if it's going to be real. You can't push someone into emotional readiness. You can't force a man to be certain before he's worked through his doubts. All you can do is stand in your value and give him the space to recognize what he has. And the truth is, when a man cares deeply, distance often brings clarity. He starts thinking about your voice, your laughter, the way you made him feel understood. He starts noticing the absence where your presence used to be. That's when he begins to understand whether he's willing to move past his fears or stay trapped inside them. Real strength isn't always chasing love. Sometimes it's allowing love the room it needs to grow. Because when a man chooses you without pressure, without fear, and without being pushed, that choice is stronger than anything you could have forced. And a man who comes back on his own is a man who finally understands what he stands to lose. Now here's another truth that doesn't get talked about enough. Sometimes when a man pulls away, it's not just about fear of intimacy, it's about the fear of losing himself. A man can care deeply about a woman and still feel unsettled when a relationship starts getting serious. Because seriousness means change, and change makes a man start asking himself questions he didn't have to answer before. Questions about responsibility, questions about his future, questions about whether he's ready to show up consistently and be the man you deserve. A lot of men grow up believing they have to have things figured out before they fully commit. They feel like they need stability, direction, and confidence in who they are. So when a relationship begins to move into deeper territory, he may start looking at his life and thinking, am I where I need to be? Am I strong enough for this? Can I maintain this? And when the answers aren't clear, he starts to feel pressure, not always from you, but from himself. See, a man wants to feel capable. He wants to feel like he can provide emotionally, mentally, and sometimes financially. When he doubts his ability to do that, distance can feel safer than closeness. Pulling away gives him time to regain a sense of control and independence. It gives him space to reconnect with who he is outside of the relationship. And that doesn't mean you are asking for too much. Sometimes it just means he's trying to steady himself. Because the truth is, a man who feels like he's losing his identity will step back, even from someone he truly cares about. If he starts feeling like every decision has to be explained, every moment has to be shared, or every piece of his time belongs somewhere else, he can begin to feel trapped even when the relationship is healthy. And once a man feels trapped, his instinct is to create distance. That's why the strongest position you can hold is continuing to live your life fully. Keep your passions, keep your goals, keep your independence. When a man sees that you are whole on your own, the relationship stops feeling like a cage and starts feeling like a choice. And a man values what he chooses far more than what he feels forced into. The right kind of connection allows two people to come together without either one disappearing. Because love isn't supposed to erase who you are. It's supposed to strengthen who you already are. And when a man realizes he can be with you without losing himself, that's when he stops pulling away. And here's the final piece most people miss. Sometimes when a man pulls away, what he's really doing is testing the emotional climate of the relationship without even realizing it. He's watching quietly to see what happens when he creates a little distance. Not because he's playing games, but because he's trying to understand whether the connection is built on pressure or peace. A man who fears intimacy often pays close attention to how a woman reacts when things aren't perfect, because deep down he's wondering what life will look like long term. If every moment of distance turns into panic, accusations, or emotional intensity, it confirms the fear he already carries. The fear that closeness means constant pressure. But if he sees steadiness instead of chaos, confidence instead of desperation, patience instead of control, something shifts inside him. He begins to feel safer. He begins to believe that being close to you doesn't mean losing his emotional balance. See, a man who struggles with intimacy is not just afraid of love. He's afraid of emotional storms he doesn't know how to navigate. Many men were never taught how to process deep feelings. They learned how to stay strong, stay quiet, and stay in control. So when emotions get intense, it can feel overwhelming. Pulling away becomes his way of calming the noise in his head. What surprises a lot of women is this. The way you respond when he pulls away often determines whether he comes back closer or stays distant. If you react by chasing harder, demanding answers, or trying to force reassurance, he feels more pressure. But when you respond with quiet confidence, you show him that the connection is strong enough to breathe. Confidence is calming. Confidence tells a man he's not walking into a storm every time he steps closer. And once he feels emotional safety, the walls he built out of fear start coming down one by one. Because the truth is, a man who feels emotionally safe doesn't need to run. A man who feels understood doesn't need to hide. A man who feels accepted doesn't need to protect himself from closeness. And when he realizes he can be close to you without fear, that's when distance turns into devotion.